Hello and welcome to this webinar training with Daniel Klein. I'm Chris Badgett from LifterLMS, and today we're going to be talking about using LifterLMS to mature your SaaS sales funnel and augment your internal training program. I'm really excited to get into this with you, Daniel, and Daniel's also has a company called Joseph Studios. You can find that at josephstudios.net. He is in our program at LifterLMS, the LifterLMS Experts Program. And I have heard from clients of his who have worked with him for their sites, what a great job they did. And they just speak really highly of Daniel and Joseph Studios. So it's really an honor to have you here. And it's an honor to see what you're up to with WordPress LMS in these bigger companies, and using courses, more in the business context inside of a business. So before I hand it over to you, for those of you who are here, feel free to ask questions. We'll have a Q&A session at the end. There's a little button where you can raise your hand if you want to go live and talk live. There's also a Q&A box that you can drop your questions in there as well. There's also a chat here in Zoom. If you're watching this on Facebook, we will keep an eye on the Facebook comments over there. There's also a link in Facebook if you want to kind of come over from Facebook into the live webinar itself. You can do that to this Zoom webinar. So feel free to ask lots of questions. We'll get those at the end. At the end, we're also going to be doing a couple of giveaways that we'll announce at the end. Daniel, it's so great to have you. So take us into it. I'm really excited to get into this topic and learn from you.
Okay, cool. Thanks for having me, Chris. And special thanks to Kathy for organizing everything. Thank you very much, Kathy. So yeah, I'm here to talk about two things that you can do with LifterLMS and WordPress that will directly impact your ability to close deals faster and for bigger bucks. So I'll start off with kind of the SaaS solution. So SaaS, if you're not familiar, is software as a service. I think also a good model fits in with PaaS, or platform as a service, same kind of thing. So the idea is you have a software or a platform or a service that's niche, right? And that's a good thing. It fits a specific need that you're very, very good at. The problem is you have to educate people on the value of what you provide. And that's always the case with everything, whether you're selling oranges or you're selling a niche BI product that'll augment your Power BI business intelligence tool, right? So there's always an education component to what you do. And how we've been using LifterLMS and WordPress together is to help clients pre-educate people when they're enthusiasts, when they're exploring options, when they're open to consideration earlier in the sales funnel, so that your onboarded sales folks, your outbound sales folks don't have to as hard, right? So there's a niche for everything, right? There's a group out there that just does urban exploring. There's a group out there that just does photography of a certain flower. There's a group out there that's interested in what you provide, but the problem is they're not educated. Education takes time and energy, and then there's this cost-benefit analysis going on for folks. Is it worth it to learn? Will I learn enough? Is it, So the idea is you have a learning management system that will ingest people who are enthusiasts about what you provide and educate them in such a way that when they come out of the course, they're now your champion. And they might not even have engaged your internal inbound sales folks yet. But at the point where they're a champion, they're already having conversations with their manager and their boss's boss and in meetings going, you know what, we really need this guy's product. We really need to be implementing this. This would fix so many problems. That in of itself is going to shorten your funnel so that when they do contact you, it's not just you now have to educate them and convince them and walk them through everything. They already know all that stuff. They're almost ready to click the buy button. They want you to send them a statement of work for $100,000 and they want to begin implementation in 2 weeks. And on top of that, here's where it gets really cool. Because of how LifterLMS is built, right, where you can have a free offering and then a purchased offering, you can give clients who purchase your SaaS or PaaS product premium access to a knowledge center that will take their ability to execute with your software to the next level. On your side, and I've seen this time and time again, you can charge $20,000 to $50,000 more for your product just by giving them access to this knowledge center. I personally have been on implementations where I've paid $40,000 for access to 12 4-hour master classes for a year. And it was worth it, because the time and energy it takes for me to build something that will transform my organization and get people onboarded onto this new system, it's not cost effective. But if I were to be given that, right, paid or not, that would make it so much easier to implement so many new tools. And that's going to help me be more competitive. And so from this perspective, I think it's wildly valuable to go with Lifter and WordPress, because it's so easy to stand up. It's secure. It is enterprise ready. And you don't have a model like you would with Udemy or some of those other competitors of y'all's, where you pay per user, which will get into a lot of trouble pretty darn quick. In this case, you implement it, takes a month usually to implement, and then next thing you know, you start getting inbound leads that are ready to smash the button. So that's awesome. Kind of that. I'll pause there and ask for feedback.
Yeah, do you mind if I have some questions and comments?
Yeah.
I really liked what you were saying with the, you're almost in some ways like making your sales team more efficient.
Oh, yeah.
Like all the repeatable education that's the same, you're just repackaging that function into a course. So I was thinking, when you were talking about that, I was thinking about the whole AIDA sales process: awareness, interest, decision, action. And when they become aware of you and they're interested at that eye level, that's such a perfect place for a course to go that doesn't have to take up a salesperson's time saying the same thing over and over again.
Exactly.
Yeah, I just thought that was super cool. And I had some questions around the knowledge center. So are you saying that like a paid knowledge center, what's the difference between that versus, like, let's say courses that are more documentation? Is it something like where, you have a service or a product offering, and there's an option for an implementation team to fly in or whatever, but the course is more like the do-it-yourself kind of model? Or what is, tell me more about the paid knowledge center and how that works.
That's very fair. So the statement I made, paid knowledge center, that's kind of the strategy. Yeah. And the tactics that then support that strategy could be different based off of the client. Here are two examples. They might apply, they might not. The first is your knowledge center is a resource for people on how to use the product, not what, and I mean that not what buttons to smash, but in what scenarios can I use your product in a more conceptual way. So like if I have
strategy, like
exactly, okay. Yeah. So if I have a problem, how do I fix that problem with your solution? And so
not just how do you use the tool, which
exactly.
is like documentation.
Exactly. I see that a lot with a lot of, SaaS solutions, I think specifically come to this, right? If you have a CRM tool, or you have a widget that fits into PeopleSoft or Salesforce or something like that, what situations would that apply to? And the detail provided might depend on whether or not it's the free or the premium. That might be one. And then secondly, the knowledge center could certainly be, how do you smash buttons and how do you navigate, and what's the difference between one versus the other?
Very cool. Very cool.
Like prep for solutioning. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. You might also get something similar. In Agile, they use these things called guilds. It's like-minded individuals that come together for a common purpose. And if your guild was focused around your knowledge center, so the situations that they find themselves in were documented into a course, that might be very beneficial. I've seen some low-code software development solutions that do this, where they have access to what they call the Forge. And folks that have problems go in there, they log how they solve the problem, and it becomes part of the premium package. So you have users developing content that you're paying to then provide, or you're selling to other folks. I think Atlassian does the same thing with Confluence. If you have Jira questions or Bamboo questions, something like that.
Very cool. Very cool.
Yeah. Any other questions? All right. We can kind of talk about the second use case if you like.
Yeah.
Okay. So another way that you can use LifterLMS is to augment your internal training. And we learn in project management, and we learn as managers, that the ideal team is between 4 and 7 people, right? So this would apply to 8+. If you have a team of 8+, I think this applies. And you run into problems when you have team members of 8+ where people don't know what other people do. And that's fine, right? We all specialize in something. We become experts at it. Cool. The problem then becomes, Betty's, I love people of all ages. Betty's 85, and at some point, Betty's not going to show up for work. Who is going to do Betty's job? Crickets. Or you have an employee or a team member, and they're phenomenal, and they are the guy. This happens everywhere. This happens at the largest companies and the smallest companies. I've seen it in both, where you have 2 or 3 people, and those are the only people that know something, right? They are the bottleneck. Everyone knows they are the bottleneck. God forbid those people want to take a vacation or get promoted, right? Because if that happens, and it pigeonholes them, and if that happens, then the lights go off, right? And big problems happen. I've seen it where no one in a county knows how to process invoices. That's a problem. I've seen it at Fortune 50 companies where no one can fix a development environment where billions of dollars worth of clients are in. That's a problem. That's a huge problem. So where LifterLMS comes into play is it's lean, it's agile, it's flexible. It's not PeopleSoft, nor should it ever be, Chris. But it's not these big monolithic training programs that come with PeopleSoft, Salesforce, all these other type of enterprise training that have bureaucracy, red tape, months of development, $250 an hour resources. It's not that. It's based in WordPress. It's available with, I'd say, probably an hour of training. Anyone could go in and start building courses. And what this does is it helps the Bettys of the world and the Johns of the world go from being the bottleneck and the pigeonhole to now they are the knowledge center. They are the resource. And if they want to go on vacation, if they want to get promoted, if they want to retire one day, that's totally cool. Because they have now spread their knowledge to the rest of the folks on the team. It works great when you and I send folks to conferences, and we don't just want to send someone to a conference and they learn something. We want the whole team to learn something. We want this to become like a culture of learning. So one requirement of going to these conferences is you now need to build a course to teach everyone else what you learned. With an hour of training, 1 or 2 lessons, good to go, and then a quiz at the end. And that's the cool part is now I can document how well everyone is progressing and learning, and I can benchmark everyone's ability to execute tasks. And that's part of the learning management portion, not just a course builder kind of tool set.
Is there a big company that you know that that's just kind of like a shining example of a culture of learning by chance?
There are a couple. There are 3.
Yeah.
For cultures of learning, can I say the name? Large financial institutions based in the Midwest that transport trillions of dollars worth of money through the internet every year. I think other big companies are on the cusp of implementing this. We're in talks with some transportation companies that transport people through air. We're large big box home improvement stores. So there are folks in the pipeline who are looking at this and saying, you know what, I don't need an enterprise decision to be able to implement this. It's going to cost, and like PeopleSoft implementations cost several hundred thousand. I've seen like 800,000 to 2.2 million typically.
And what kind of timeline?
Typically years.
Yeah.
Okay, the project manager always comes in and says it'll be 9 months. Right? Wrong. 2 to 3 years, and it's going to cost triple. And $250 an hour resources. That's not cool. But LifterLMS, 40 grand, 10 grand, something like that. Courses included and all that. And then you get the training to teach everybody else. And the next thing you know, everyone on the team is building courses and benchmarking each other. It works great for HR purposes to be able to prove that everyone on your team got sexual harassment training. And it's not just that they signed a piece of paper years ago and they got some kind of training. You can actually go back and tell the court, God forbid the day happen, that, no, this guy or gal received this lesson and they got 100% on the quiz, which proves they understood these concepts. So case dismissed. And then you get yourself out of a lot of legal problems as a result of that.
That's cool. And back to the culture of learning thing, I was thinking about Google, where they have, I think it's called Flex Time or something, where you can work on whatever you want. But I'm not sure if they're actively like curating what people are learning. They're just like helping people become more creative, but I don't know if there's an actual process for people to then share what they learned. They're just trying to make them better employees, maybe, or more creative and, you know, like their job and stuff, right?
It is difficult to implement, that's for sure. And you can always get a leader out there and say, yeah, we want to be a culture of learning and 15% of your day needs to be something else. And then when it comes down to it, the deadline is the deadline.
Yeah.
So yeah, this would be a good way to hold people and yourself accountable.
Yeah, that's cool. Well, I have more questions, but I don't want to, if you have more to go,
it's really straightforward, Chris.
Yeah.
It's really straightforward. HR purposes, being able to audit yourself. And when folks come in and say, do you have all your OSHA training? Is everyone OSHA compliant? Yeah. And here's the proof. Here's their scores.
On that note, you might be able to like license courses. Like you don't necessarily have to, there might be other ways to get some course content that
very much so.
exists. You know, you don't necessarily have to invent everything.
There are resources out there. There are websites with databases of certified courses, or they're the benchmark to the latest OSHA regulation or HIPAA regulation or something like that, or EPA or FDA or something else we deal with sometimes. Yeah.
That's very
based.
Also, you said sometimes it's hard to get the machine rolling of the culture of learning. Mm-hmm. What's popular, it seems like it's growing in popularity in businesses, is to try to develop SOPs, standard operating procedures. And, you know, ever since like the E-Myth book came out a while ago, people got really into working on the business, in the business, and developing systems and all this stuff. And I think one of the big bottlenecks that people have is, well, as the CEO or the owner, business owner or manager or whatever, I don't have time to make all this stuff. But the reality is you can get your team involved. And like when you said, okay, we'll pay for you to go to this conference, but you need to, in exchange, you're going to have to come back and teach what you learn and curate that learning inside of a course on our internal training platform. I think that's a brilliant idea.
Yeah, 100% agree. It is difficult to kind of step out of the dumpster fire of the day and build a process to kind of move the company forward. And holding other people accountable to these functional areas is a great way to let them do it for you, instead of you always worrying about how is this process going to play out and is it effective?
Yeah. Could you tell more about the number? You said if a team size is moving from beyond 4 to 7, this kind of thing becomes even more important. Why is that? What do you mean?
So I'm a project management professional and Lean Six Sigma black belt. And we learn in that training that there's an ideal size for a team, not so small that you don't get a good amount of ideas, or you can't delegate work effectively, but not so large that you have trouble keeping track of everybody. You have trouble getting consensus-based decisions. You have problems with bottlenecks. And so when I said more than 7 or like 8+, that's really when you start running into the danger zone of I have bottlenecks or I have a single point of failure kind of syndrome. Certainly that is the case with the lower numbers, but you kind of get into an extreme where you need to start making a decision, or it's a value-based decision rather than an investment.
That makes sense. I've also heard of Dunbar's number. I'm not sure. By the way, we just did a podcast with Daniel on our podcast LMS cast that went live. So go check out that interview there. We go into some of this and other stuff too. But there's this thing called Dunbar's number. I think it's 150 people, which is the number of people that you can like kind of maintain relationships and remember. Like that's what, like as a, I guess a tribal human being, that's like our max, 150.
That's right.
So when you talk about these kind of this like internal knowledge base or internal training, especially if the company is more than 150, if it's thousands or tens of thousands of employees who don't necessarily, they don't know each other, and
right.
They physically can't because of Dunbar's number, you can really curate the all-star employees and the wisdom and like the job skills and the onboarding to the job position at scale, which is like literally kind of humanly impossible.
Exactly. Right. And you can prove, not just assure, but you can approve that everyone got the same training. The training was consistent, that you have what we like to call the perfect onboarding, where it's not, and I've done this with small, medium, and large companies before LifterLMS. Onboarding happens thanks to a email or thanks to a Excel file. And you just have the names of people that this person needs to reach out to and sit side by side with, and the topic they need to cover and the number of hours. And that's just enough to get you by with the boss. But what if when people came on board, there was courses that they had to go through, and they were interactive, they were built by the employees they'll be working with, and they covered pertinent information. And then you could grade them off of that. So you start to break even day one, right? You complete a course, you get 100% on the quiz, your boss instantly gets an email that says, hey, someone completed this quiz, they got 100%. And I'm like, okay, so this guy's starting to get it. Cool. Very cool. That's the idea.
Yeah, that's awesome. You talked about black box people. Or what was your word for it? Just like, I hope Betty never...
Yeah, Betty never keels over.
Yeah.
So that's like...
Yeah, like the black box, like that's a huge problem. Why is that problem just so out of control in the business world?
I think it happens because of longevity, which is a beautiful thing. A lot of companies go through mergers and they buy systems and applications, and people sometimes come along with those mergers. And then all of a sudden they have a couple hundred people on a team, but like 2 or 3 that are legacy. And they're the only ones that have the 20 years of experience that built that system from the ground up. That happens a lot. There are people that have been in the office forever and a day, and they just have the connections. They have the little black book of all the people they need to call in certain circumstances. That happens on occasion. So there are different reasons for why that's the case. Kind of an interesting thing for the folks that are on the podcast or watch this later that are interested in this, you'll run into 2 problems. And that's that you have, well, let's focus on one first. You have a person who is the bottleneck and they feel threatened by this learning management system that's coming in. It's going to take over. The robots are taking over, and they have a problem. Yeah. And we typically ask clients to fix this in 2 ways. And there's the carrot and the stick method. We prefer the carrot over the stick. The stick is like too bad, tough. You have to do it or you're out. Yeah. The carrot, which we prefer, is, well, you'll be the champion of this, Betty. This is your thing, right? This isn't just you giving up your favorite recipes for your brownies and cakes, whatever. We've all been there. This is your thing. This is your learning. This is your legacy. This is what you will do. You're now in charge of the learning management system and these courses that cover the things that you do. So now you have additional responsibility.
That is very cool. Like if you're talking to a company that is looking to implement internal training, what are their like objections? Like what do they have to get through before they decide to really move forward on a project?
It's rarely the budget, because the budget, comparatively speaking to the other solutions out there, is so low. Yeah. So that's not been an obstacle. The main obstacle has been consensus-based decision-making and getting all the directors and managers, some of whom are those bottlenecks, on board with the idea of being replaceable. And in a lot of companies, that's not a happy feeling. And I understand that. No one wants to feel replaceable, but if you kind of take yourself out of it, and we go with this carrot method that we just covered, it's definitely achievable. You can get past that consensus-based decision by having a strong leader that says, you know what, this is for us, this is what we need to do. And then having folks on board with taking accountability for their tasks and making sure that everything's documented well. And if they really want to be experts at that thing, they'll make sure it's documented.
Gotcha. I have another question on part 1 about the SaaS companies.
Yeah.
If I, like as a software company myself, what types of courses, as an example, would be in that, in the paid knowledge center versus like my free user onboarding courses to understand and use the software? Like what's an example program that I might develop?
For LifterLMS, for some premium services that you might want to develop, I would go back, and we help clients with this. So you have user personas. And this is also why Joseph Studios is a marketing company too, because you have to speak with people who are in that I need to market better phase.
Yeah.
So for you guys, I would go back to your user personas and say, okay, who are my principal users? What are their principal needs? And what scenarios do they typically find themselves in? And then if you have a scenario where like a site entrepreneur wants to start an online fitness blog with a augmented
Course
learning management course certification. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Then what are some of the things they will need? Well, they might need help getting people into that funnel. What are some ways that LifterLMS helps you get into the funnel? Well, there's Twilio integrations, right?
Twilio, yeah.
Twilio integrations, where you can send a text to a phone number and it automatically enrolls you. So then now I can go out to yoga classes and I can go out to meetups and I can say, hey, text enroll to this number and you'll be auto enrolled into my course. It also dumps you into my sales funnel. So that might be a course. So you're training people on how to use the program in tactical ways.
That makes sense. I think we lost you for a second, but you'll be back. You're back.
I'm
that
sorry.
Makes sense. I appreciate you explaining that. And that's it. And could you even touch on stuff like outside of what the software does, but strategies that we've seen people using our software do that really work? I mean,
yeah,
because it's not all about just the SaaS product. It fits into a bigger complex of things.
I think so. Yeah, you could train people on what you provide.
Yeah,
you can have people pay you to then train them on more things to buy from you.
Right. That makes sense. Well, somebody from the audience was just saying they're super stoked on the topic. They had to bounce, but they're gonna watch the replay later, and they just wanted to say thanks. Anybody in the audience have any questions you'd like to chat live? There's a little feature in Zoom where you can raise your hand and ask a question to Daniel. He really knows this stuff, and he's a strategic thinker. For the uninitiated, could you describe the Six Sigma and all that, like what that's all about?
Yeah, that's fair. So I'll take a step back before it was called Six Sigma. So there was a guy named Casey Deming.
Yeah.
And Deming he had this idea of process improvement. And he had a philosophy that he wanted to implement called DMAIC, or Define, Measure, Analyze, Improve, Control, that he wanted to see American companies implement. And no one would hear him out. Well, World War II ended. Actually, this is a good reason. It is very arguable that we won World War II as a result of, helped by this process. Deming went to Japan and he helped them rebuild. And he and his philosophy were the cause of what they now call the Third Industrial Revolution, or the post-war economic miracle. And that's why Japan recovered so quickly. And they love this. They adopted it. Motorola, especially Toyota, and that's where Six Sigma come from. It's essentially you take a scientific approach to a problem or a process, and you develop hypotheses for why it's not working to a standard that you set. And then you go through a scientific method to fix those problems, and then you control the process in a way that those defects don't happen again. And so Six Sigma, you have a distribution of outcomes, right, along an axis. And you might have seen it looks like a bell curve, right? And the idea is that you get all the outcomes of your process to 6 standard deviations out from the mean, the average. And so if you have 1 million attempts or possibilities for a defect, only 3.4 defects will be shown, which is phenomenal, right? Out of every 1 million attempts, 3.4 defects. But it actually isn't enough for some industries like surgeries. Or God forbid you get the 3. Or 3.4 minutes of poisoned water. You know,
Right.
In some circumstances, it's not good enough, but in many, it's phenomenal.
Very cool. Well, thanks for explaining that. Mike from the audience is asking, what would a base solution from Lifter look like at a high level? So
You want to take it?
go ahead and take it. And Mike, maybe provide a little more detail as Daniel starts talking here. But go ahead.
Okay. Base solution for LifterLMS, we always like to put folks on the free version first so they can kind of test it out. So I think you can start LifterLMS with a 4-page website, home, about, contact us, and blog, and then just augment LifterLMS on top of that. You don't have to worry about look and feel because it'll adopt the theme look and feel initially, and you can kind of play with it as you go. And then 1 or 2 courses just to start out, maybe 1 course to kind of get folks into your sales funnel about what you provide and what you do. Or if you have a freebie, like the freemium models, where you provide some document or some thing, copy and paste it, put it into a course. And the benefit of that is now you can better track their interest level. And it's not just they get a free download and they have to fork over their email. It's they get something out of it. They get a course, they get a certificate. And if they complete the course, then they're pretty darn serious.
That's awesome. And Mike has a clarifying process or comment for SaaS training specifically. What would a base solution look like? And you kind of mentioned 2 sides, like the sales funnel, like before the sale, and then how you could potentially use it after the sale. But what would a base solution look like in the SaaS context?
Let's, if we're all familiar with Jira or Atlassian, or some sort of project management or workload tool, they help you organize. Okay, cool. So let's go with Jira. So Jira has a couple base applications. If you just know Jira, you might type in Google, what's Jira? You might go to the Atlassian website, and then in this scenario, you would sign up for the course. You sign up for the course, and it takes you through screenshots or a video demo with screen sharing of, here's Jira, here are 3 user examples of Jira, next lesson. This is Sally. And then you start talking about the story, the brand story and the user persona and how they experience your product. This is Sally. Sally's a Scrum Master. Scrum Masters deal with all sorts of difficult problems, like Jerry. Jerry doesn't want to get his work done. So Sally goes into Jira and looks at the backlog, and she sees that Jerry has a problem on the weekends using the analysis tool, right? So now we're not just, sell, but we're walking people through the story of a day in the life. A day in the life of the user from this user persona. We'll use your product in this way and this way and this way. Their friend, who's also a developer, could experience your product in this way and this way. And then you break that up into lessons or courses, and they can take the one that's most pertinent. And then they spit out. Now okay, I'm talking to Gerald, his rep is Sally, who's a Scrum Master, and you can start updating your CRM to have more applicable discussions.
And he said like the persona plus epic.
Like the persona plus epic. Not sure what question.
In Agile, I think that epic is like too many users. They're more. It's big. It's a lot of user stories. It's not a single user story. It's like a collection of them.
Yeah. So Sally, I guess, could use epics and the reporting in Jira for the epic. If you have specific projects that are each epics, she might be able to use it that way. I hope I understand the question correctly.
I think one of the big innovations here, like if I think about a marketing site for a SaaS company, like if you look at a really clean hero area above the fold homepage of a company, there's usually like a headline, subheadline, and 2 buttons. Buy now and learn more. And what most companies do with the learn more is they go to their features page. But instead of going to the features page, why not go to some training like you're talking about here, with the personas, with the stories, and organized in a coherent way, because most software products or any product really has a segmented user base. So your sections of the course, or you could have courses for different types of personas or whatever. It's a totally different strategy than just dumping people on like, here's what the widget does. Right?
Exactly. And the benefit, either with Lifter or with using Jira as our example, now they're going to start having demos, right? Because I know Jira has a free version. I know Lifter has a free version. Yeah. And if you teach them how to use it, Sally's perspective and Jerry's perspective, next thing you know, they're, hey boss, come over here, let me show you this. Next thing you know, they're giving demos on your behalf, right? So now your sales folks don't have to go to the demo. They get into the meeting and they go, hey, would you like to see a demo? And they go, no, we're good. We're good.
Yeah.
Let's get to the invoice.
Yeah. Yeah, that's brilliant. Well, Rodney has a question, wants to chat live. And before I bring him up, he also has a question in the box that says, if we're using the lean process and we're selling the courses curriculum to clients, what selling pitch has worked for you to explain that we will be applying interactive updates to the materials?
That is a really, really, really good question. And
I'm going to bring him up here.
Yeah, bring him up and we'll have a chit chat. Can he hear me as he comes up?
I can hear you. Hey guys.
Hey, how's it going? I've seen it work in some larger companies where they have a demo site, and there's all the development work doesn't happen on the developer's local. It'll happen on a subdomain or a different domain altogether where the development takes place. Yep. And then as you introduce these new concepts to your clients, I would do it on a reoccurring basis. I would have an SLA with a client that says you will have 30 days notice that your content is going to be updated. I would take those kind of communicative approaches. I would, if there isn't someone who is customer support on your team, I would take on that role and send out updates and say, hey, we have these features being released this day. You have 30 days. Here's how it impacts you. If you have any questions, let me know, that kind of stuff. Okay. And then if you have bugs along the way, just be transparent and let them know, hey, we had a bug, we're rolling it back, or hey, we're working with you to fix this issue, or have also feedback options so that it's not just them letting you know that there's a problem, but that potentially the system could let you know. Like user enrollments drop dramatically all of a sudden, or people don't get past a certain lesson, or they can't pass a certain quiz all of a sudden.
Right. Okay. So in a way you could actually put them in the sandbox, or have a mechanism for them to go in the sandbox and then leave you feedback iteratively before the actual rollout so that you can address that.
Yes. And it could be an FYI instead of a stop sign. And by that, I mean, you could say, hey, we have A, B, and C feature being released on the 1st of September. You have 10 days in our certification environment to let us know what you think. And if you have problems, let us know, we'll fix it. If they don't let you know, you roll it out. If they do let you know, you roll it out, and then you put the bugs behind it.
Okay. All right. Thanks. I appreciate it. Thanks a lot.
Yeah.
Thanks, Rodney.
Thanks, Chris.
Move you back down here. Anybody else have any questions for Daniel while he's with us? Feel free to raise your hand or use the Q&A box. We're also going to do our giveaway now that we do. So, Kathy, if you're ready. So Daniel's giving away something and we're giving away something. Daniel is giving away a free LifterLMS website and hosting for a year. So we'll start with that. Mike, I see your question coming in. We'll get to that in just a second. And maybe while Kathy's drawing, we can go ahead and jump into the question. Oh, there it is. Marco DiCarlo won the site from Daniel. Congratulations, Marco. And what's the best way to get in touch with you, Daniel? Over at josephstudios.net?
Yeah, if they send me an email, info@josephstudios.net, or if Kathy can link us up, then we'll get you started, Marco.
Awesome. And we're going to take this question from Mike, and then we're going to do a LifterLMS giveaway here. So any typical objections to overcome? Yeah, I kind of asked you that question too. He was the SaaS guy, so.
Okay, so objections to overcome for SaaS. It's typically new, a new idea, and new ideas take time, right, just to kind of digest. So that's not really an objection. It's maybe more of a speed bump. You got to, pitch the idea to the boss and see what he thinks. You got to get it, funded, whether it's this year or next year, and you have to overcome that. And that's more of a timing thing, more of a speed bump. Objections, a lot of folks will ask, well, what other big companies are using this? And I'll, in those meetings, maybe throw out one or two names, or say, a couple $1 billion company here and a $100 million company there. And that usually overcomes things. They want to know that it's enterprise ready, and it is. 30% of the internet is WordPress. So secure and all that.
And he's clarifying too, objections related to using a learning management system for awareness. So I guess that's more before the sale.
I think they will want to know learning management system from the perspective of the client or the potential consumer.
I think it's the potential prospect, like the value
Prospect.
of courses as opposed to just what people have been doing for marketing and awareness.
I haven't really come across any. Usually when we get in with the bosses and they start seeing the numbers, it's like, you know, when you have this ability, you have something else that you could turn into a thing. You could turn this into its own deliverable that you could add into contracts. That could be a thing. When they start to see the value coming in of people getting to their salespeople more prepared, when they start to see their sales funnel starting to shrink, those are the stories that'll be more compelling. Before that, it might be a little bit of a leap of faith, and the biggest question we're going to get is, well, what does it cost to keep this thing going every year? But WordPress is free. I think a license on some platforms is like $40-$60 a year. Hosting is like $100, $150 a year. And then LifterLMS base is free. And then if you get the Infinity bundle, then that's like $1,200, $1,000.
Yeah.
There you go. So that's super, super affordable.
And as a SaaS company myself, a software company, you had me at the moment when you're like more qualified leads and less, and whatever sales function you do have is about to become a lot more efficient.
Yeah.
So that's like, I don't really have an objection to either of those concepts.
And most folks, they want to play it by ear. You know, they want to kind of feel it out a little bit. They want to get their toe wet, and that's totally doable because there's that free option, right? So a couple $100, and then you engage us with a couple $100, and we get it going for you, and then you kind of play it by ear, see how it goes, do a pilot, and if it works, cool.
Yeah, and Mike's saying he really sees the value in engaging pre-sales so that the prospects come in more prepared. So,
yeah.
And if you can pilot that somehow with the client and like just prove that happens, I mean, you're in like Flynn.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, we will do our giveaway for LifterLMS. So we're giving away one of our $99 add-ons. If you already have something, we can apply that to what you have or hook you up with a discount against something more expensive. So if you want to draw that winner, Kathy, it is Fernando Canelis. Congratulations, Fernando. Send us an email to team@lifterlms.com. Daniel, I want to thank you for coming on and sharing this with us today. This is an important part of the LMS industry. There's a lot of buzz and conversation right now around, making courses for profit, for like the solo education entrepreneur, but there's this whole like inside of a company of all sizes where education is such an important part that people aren't capitalizing as much as they could on internal training. And it doesn't have to be, like you said, a 3-year implementation for a giant, fully integrated LMS with an implementation team and all that. Like the tools have gotten so much more approachable and affordable. And your ideas around maturing a SaaS funnel are really interesting. So you've piqued my curiosity on a lot of that. So thank you for sharing all that.
No problem. So we're just past the mid-year reviews for everybody, just a friendly reminder. And you have 6 months to really make up the difference if you needed to, or kind of just put a couple extra gold stars next to your name at the end of the year reviews and bonus time. So it's a good time to kind of take a step foot out and check it out for yourself.
Yeah, that's awesome. And if you're watching this right now or watching the replay, what is the best way to get in touch with you and Joseph Studios?
There's a couple ways. If you go to our website, josephstudios.net, you can schedule a one-on-one appointment with me. And you could also reach out to us at info@josephstudios.net, or you can just hit us up in the chat.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Daniel. I really appreciate it. And thanks for coming on here today and sharing with the LifterLMS and course building community here.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks for having me. Thank you, Kathy, and thank you, everybody.